Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, he predicted trouble in Ukraine. Trends Journal's Gerald Celente tells us where he believes the next hot spot will be. Author of Timing the Real Estate Market, Robert Campbell, has his eye set on Texas. We'll talk to Gerald Celente right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600. Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Sitting in for Phil Mackesy, here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Gerald Celente, editor of the Trends Journal. Maybe, Gerald, just explain off the top what the Trends Journal does for people if they haven't heard about what you do and the product you put out.
Well, it's the only magazine that you will find that will help you prepare for the future and thrive and survive. It's history before it happens, and we've been at this, the magazine, writing it since 1991. It's 50 pages, full color, and it covers the globe, and in a lot of different varieties of fields, whether they be in technology, economy, health, social change, to style and fashion. So it really covers more than just the waterfront.
Well, I think one of the trends that people are looking at right now is Russia trying to snap up Europe again. Is that going to be a trend of the future?
Well, you see, that's the way people look at it, just the way you said it. And what people aren't looking at, and we really if you go back to the winter edition of the Trends Journal, we wrote the cover story was Ukraine. And this is before it blew up to the proportions that it is what happened in February. And we said there'd be a civil war there. And you read this edition, and it's outlined. Tracking trends, by the way, is an understanding of how we got here, where we are, and where we're going. And most people don't know how we got here. The Ukraine crisis was totally fomented by the United States and the European Union. And I'm not saying that in terms of speculation. It's there for anybody to look at and listen to if they have the desire to. And for starters, if they go onto YouTube and put in Victoria Nuland, N-U-L-A-N-D, that's America's Assistant Secretary of State, December 13th, 2013. And there you'll see here at the National Press Club, sponsored by, right over his shoulder, Chevron, and the United States Assistant Secretary of State saying that the future of Ukraine is with Europe and that they should follow the path set forth by the European Union. This is America's Secretary of State and I always thought half of Ukraine, or a good chunk of it, was Russian. But little did I know, she knows everything. And then you listen to the audio tapes there for everyone to listen to, of her and the United States Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, P-Y-A-T-T. And you could hear the audio tape of them on the telephone prior to the overthrow of the Yanukovych government, saying that they wanted to put in, quote, Yats, and that's Yatsenyuk, who's in there now. And then you go back to that Chevron sign. I found out they did a deal. It's there for everybody to see. I think Reuters even covered it back in November for $10 billion to do hydrofracking. Oh, I forgot this. Just found out a couple of days ago. Joe Biden's little boy, Hunter Biden, is now sitting on the board of directors and chief legal counsel for the biggest energy company in Ukraine. Oh, not only him, so too is John Kerry's stepson, Christopher Hines, the Hines Fortune heir, his roommate. And they both have a business together, Archer. He's over there in that company in the Ukraine too, the biggest oil company, does 10% of all the gas production and selling of gas in Ukraine. So people don't know what this is about. It's also about the neocon agenda. That's very clear, and that's to weaken Russia and to put missile systems in Poland and Czech Republic. Even Rand Paul's talking about doing that. And putting Russia in a place where they're not going to be able to withstand any kind of attack or reply to one. And again, it's all there, and we write about it in detail. And if anybody wants more information, not only in the Trends Journal, but I suggest they go to Paul Craig Roberts, just as it sounds, paulcraigroberts.org, the former Assistant Treasury Secretary of the United States. He's been following this better than anyone that I've known. Matter of fact, he's even contributed an article to the Current Trends Journal. So it's the United States and Europe that are doing this. And Russia is responding the way Russia does. So if anybody thinks that Obama leading a charge on a white horse, or Cameron over there in the UK, picking up his hatchet and spear, or maybe strapping some six-shooters on Hollande that's going to take out Russia, if Hitler and Napoleon couldn't pull it off, what makes anybody think the United States and Europe can? The United States can't even win a war in Iraq or Afghanistan. They lost Vietnam. They're going to beat the Russians? The Russians will die till they eat the last sunflower seed to fight. I don't know how people get this in their mind. You don't poke the Russian bear. And I'm an American. I believe in the foundation upon which this nation was established. No foreign entanglements. I mean, it was good enough for Washington to say that at his farewell address, and for Jefferson and Madison and Franklin and all the rest of the founding fathers. Who made this stuff up that we have to get involved in somebody else's war? So if the Ukrainians want to kill themselves, that's their business.
But if you're taking Canadians and Americans with them, not so much fun.
Again, who's going to go? I love what they use this term, by the way, when soldiers come back in caskets, they call it the ultimate sacrifice. What are you sacrificing for? Hunter Biden? Oh, I guess Hunter Biden and John Hines, Chris Hines, the heir to the Hines fortune. I guess, and the kid that's involved in it, I guess they're the brightest people in the world. They are the only two candidates that have the best merit and credentials to work with one of the largest oil companies, gas companies in Ukraine. I mean, come on. It's an inside job.
I guess it's sort of like George W. running the Texas Rangers. What did he know about baseball? What did he know about the oil companies? I think Daddy set it up for him pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. How about Halliburton? Look at the hundreds of billions they've made in the wars. And Dick Cheney happened to be, the CEO before he became vice president? I mean, what are people going to get over being over 6 years old? How can anybody buy this crap anymore? How many more wars? How many more dead? How much more destruction do people have to have in front of them? It keeps saying, is the stock market rigged? Is the gold market rigged? Is the LIBOR rate rigged? Is the Forex rigged? When are people going to wake up and have some courage to see what's going on and face the facts?
It seems to me since the Second World War, the U.S. is not happy unless it's involved in some kind of an armed conflict somewhere.
Well, yeah, there's psychopaths and sociopaths, not only in the United States. And look what's going on, these little boys. They're all little boys. These guys that never fought a day in their lives, like Obama and Cameron and Hollande and Sarkozy before him. They start wars in foreign countries and they send out Harper. Oh yeah, I can see Harper fighting his way out of a paper bag. And they all talk tough, and they get somebody else's kids killed. So no, what they do, this has never ended. These are psychopaths and sociopaths, and no one wants to call them what they are. And the United States, Eisenhower warned the country, this is a 5-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces, and 2-term president, tells the country as he's leaving office, the military-industrial complex is taking over the show, robbing us of the future of our children, the genius of the scientists, and the sweat of the laborers. Voila, here we are.
Is there any way for somebody who's trying to invest in a world where these people are making deals in secret, how can the average person put their money somewhere and know that it's going to grow and be safe?
You never know. Nobody ever knows. Look, I'm a trend forecaster. Always make it clear I'm not a futurist. No one can predict the future. There are too many wild cards, whether they're man-made or made by Mother Nature. And I'm only speaking for myself. I don't give financial advice. I invested in some, historic buildings in Colonial Kingston, New York, where we're headquartered. And I bought them in 2012 at ridiculously low prices and low interest rates. One of them I locked in a 15-year rate, 15 years at 2.875. And I also, I'm a big holder of gold. I've been buying gold since 1978. Look, if you you lived in Ukraine right now, what would you rather have? The local currency, or be sitting on having a pot full of gold or silver?
It's not a hard decision.
Not a hard decision. And that's what this is for. Look, here's the big lie, among others, and that is there's this whole deflationary cycle taking place. What world are these people living in? Deflationary? How about oil prices? How about gas prices? How about electric prices? Been shopping lately? Oh, your rent gone down? Houses got cheaper? What world are they living in? So they're saying this so that they can keep these interest rates at artificially all-time lows and keep juicing the equity markets to make it seem like everything's okay. So so those are the facts as we see them. And and then we tell people, think for yourself. Yeah, this is what we do. We're not telling you to do anything. You make up your own decisions. But, if you want to go invest in the market, if that's your trip, knock yourself out. It's not what we do. We're very conservative in our investments, and gold for me is my golden years. I don't trade it. I buy it.
And with China snapping up all the physical gold in the world last year and doing the same now, India's election will probably see them open the gold markets again to the public. Gold is going to be more popular than ever.
I believe so. Here's our forecast, just so you know. We're saying that gold does have a downside risk. There's no question about it, because you have, the banks keep coming out with their forecasts of how low it's going to go. And again, the markets are rigged. Everything is rigged. The facts are there. I mean, I'm not making it up. The facts, the Forex, the LIBOR, the stock markets, there's enough information's come out. And I believe gold is being rigged too. So it can go down another $100, $150. That's not a big downside risk, as I see it. Again, if you're trading it, it is, but long haul, it's not.
And I understand usually when we see a big price drop, it's one of the major investors who have dumped their gold temporarily, hoping to drive the price down so they can buy it back at a cheaper price and then sell it higher.
Well, again, and what are they dumping? They're dumping paper. They're shorting the markets. They're in these naked shorts. So it's not real gold. But when you look at real gold, it's a different trip. You can't dump it like that. So that's why I say the markets are being manipulated. So what we're saying is when gold breaks over 1475, that's when we believe there's going to be the next gold bull run. When you look at what's going on in when we're talking about Ukraine, and we're talking about Europe, and we're talking about the economy of the United States, the economy of Europe stinks. They don't even call it a depression, what's going on in Spain and Greece, at 25, 27, 30% unemployment. They still, the flunkies, the prostitutes still call it a recession. Okay. We know that public debt and private debt is at all-time highs in these countries. They're destabilized already economically. Okay, now you're going to make it worse with heating up the Ukraine crisis? Wonderful. Yeah, that'll make a bad situation a lot better. So what I'm saying to you, Jim, and to everyone listening, is that this is a very volatile situation and one that's in a state of flux. It can go anywhere. And what I know, as I see it, is that you have the incompetents and the inepts in charge. People that are over their head. The United States and Europe overplayed their hand in Ukraine. Because by overplaying it, they wanted Crimea. They wanted to freeze Russia out of their only warm water port. And people don't realize this. Russia's been in Crimea for you know how many years?
How long has Russia been around?
You got it. 1783.
The Crimean War, wasn't that the charge of the Light Brigade?
You got it. Into the Valley of Death.
10,000 guns aimed at 800 guys.
You got it.
And I know, the 2 or 3 survivors, when they got to the end of the valley, the Russian troops came and smelled their breath because they thought they had to be drunk out of their minds to charge into a valley surrounded by 10,000 cannon. So are we charging into a valley surrounded with 10,000 cannon again?
That's what I'm saying. Anybody who thinks they're going to take out Russia's out of their mind. And what have the Russians done? Oh, I know that, the Russians did invade Afghanistan, but so did the United States, and so did Canada, and so did the Coalition of the Willing that also invaded Iraq. And I don't believe it was Russia that invaded Libya and overthrew the sovereign state of the government that was there. And now look at the turmoil they've caused. I mean, you see the Trends Journal. What was one of the big stories we had in there? Nigeria. Before Nigeria was in the news. People don't know what's going on over there. And this is all being destabilized because of the overthrow of Gaddafi and all the weapons going to these aren't Islamic radicals. These are people that are out of their minds. They're mafia, just in a different number, in a different place, in a different time zone. And it also, again, I've been writing about this for years. I coined the term Crusades 2000 when I wrote Trends 2000 in 1996. And I said, with people having no place to go, no future, no money, seeing their country destroyed, robbed by those in power, and being supported by the Western powers, they would gravitate toward radical fundamentalists. Duh. They've done it. They have nowhere to go. You look what's going on up in northern Nigeria. And, not only is it a dead zone, the people are dying all over the place. Nigeria is one of the richest countries in Africa. They have over 20 billionaires. They have 174 million people, and they're rich in oil. But they're being raped by the robbers. Name the country, race, creed, color, religion, sex, gender, doesn't make any difference. It's immorality. And people get caught up in the geopolitics of it, which has very little to do with the reality, when the reality is immorality.
More with Gerald Celente next on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision. More and more people are looking to the Internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Gerald Celente, editor of Trends Journal. Check it out online. We'll talk about it a bit more later. You said, okay, we know that Trends Journal picked out that Ukraine was going to be a hot spot, Nigeria was going to be trouble. Well, what's the trend? Where do we go next? Is it one of the islands off China that they're fighting over with Japan? Do we have North Korea go nut bar on us? Although I think that's just a constant factor now. Where do you think the next one they're going to try to pull off? And by the way, I keep hearing from people, insiders, that this is all done to divert us from a bad economy, to get our minds off that so we worry about little girls who have been kidnapped.
Well, when all else fails, they take you to war. I mean, you go throughout history. And this won't be any different about those girls being kidnapped. I mean, you want to talk about hypocrisy? It's 300 are our girls. No, they're not our girls. They're another country's girls. We have girls go 10 blocks away from where I live. Go 15 blocks from the White House. You want to see poor girls living in shelters? Girls in poverty? How about taking care of the girls at home? I mean, they always use this stuff. They did that with Libya. You remember that humanitarian mission? This is always the card that they play.
Well, I've heard a figure like 100,000 young women and older girls kidnapped and put into sex slavery, not in Africa, but right in North America.
Again, look what's going on all over go to St. Louis, go to Trenton, go to Camden. You go anywhere. You see poor people all over the place. Nobody gives a damn about poor kids. Again, this is political. This politicians. They'll feast off anything that they can, and use it as an excuse. So as we go around the world, what's the next hotspot? I think you nailed it with China, and because what you're looking to is Japan is becoming militaristic again. They're passing new laws to build their military. And Japan can't get out of their economic doldrums. Abenomics is a total failure. In terms of GDP, they've pumped in 3 times the amount of stimulus than the United States did. And it's gotten them nowhere, other than, of course, making the rich more filthy rich. So we're going to continue to see more strife there. Look what's going on in Thailand. The government that was democratically elected, the prime minister, the court said now, because it's another fake court like just the rest of the world, that she's no longer allowed to run the country. And then you look at, and they're one of the largest rice exporters in the world. And then you look what's going on down in Venezuela. Take a trip down to Argentina. Go over to Brazil. Go throughout Europe, whether it's Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece. There's protests continually. Take a lovely, lovely tour to Yemen. If you don't get hit by a drone, maybe you'll make it out of there. And then you go to Bahrain. Nobody ever talks about that because the Fifth Fleet is there, so we can't talk about that civil war that's brewing. And of course, Libya, as I said, and then there's Syria. And so you go around the world, and it's a destabilized world, and it could explode at any point. And that's why I keep going back to gold and silver. And to me, and again, we have no advertisements in our magazine, no advertisements on our trendsjournal.com site, or trendsresearch.com. We don't take a dime from anybody. So what I'm saying is this is what we believe, and we're not pumping anything or selling anything, other than, of course, our services in the Trends Journal.
And your knowledge that you hope that somebody will pay attention to someday.
Well, they do. We're doing, knock on wood, the Trends Journal is a third of our subscription base is overseas. And in this time when magazines are shrinking, ours is growing. It's 50 pages, full color. And when you get the hard copy edition, I could tell you that there is no higher quality magazine in terms of paper and print in the world that can match it. I mean, maybe there are some, I just don't know about them. But so we're doing very well because we're putting out information that most people won't. The major media certainly won't go near. And when you have advertisers, you have to compromise yourself. Often, not all the time.
What about the pharmaceutical giants? They keep on buying each other, merging. Will there ever be affordable prescription drugs again?
No, and unless things are changed again. And what people don't realize is this is a repeat of history, just in a different style. There was another time when there were things people call robber barons, and they were the industrialists. Now we have robber barons that have taken over the drug companies. How many drugstores do we have in the States anymore? Local pharmacies, compared to what we used to have. Now we have, 3 of them? Rite Aid, Walgreens, and CVS, and a couple of little scattered pharmacies here or there. How many stationery stores do we have anymore? They all used to be locally owned. Now all we have is, Staples and Office Depot. You keep going up and down the list. Go into grocery stores. It's a multinational takeover. Drugs are only one of it. And so they're oligarchs, and they're controlling the marketplace.
Yeah, one of the thrills of being a tourist was always going to a different town, a city, a country, and seeing different things. And now you see the same food stores, the same service stations. It all looks the same, like the same mini mall that you just passed 100 miles ago.
Yes, and also when you see it on the higher end, a Gucci, a Prada, one after another, where there used to be, the butcher, the macaroni store, the cheese store, whatever. And now it's all, when I go to Italy, I keep seeing it changing and changing and changing. And you go all over the world, it looks the same anymore.
Well, Vancouver doesn't look the same anymore. It does look like something out of science fiction. They do shoot science fiction shows here because the downtown of Vancouver does look like the way the future should look. And by the way, a lot of that was built back in 1986 for Expo. So they're showing stuff that's 30 years old and telling us that's the future.
Yeah, well, Vancouver's beautiful. I've been there, a lovely place. And but most of the states, you could put a blindfold on somebody and you won't know where you are.
Vancouver's one of the few places left in North America where there are still ma and pa corner stores. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I know. It's a lovely place, and it's unique, and the people are fighting to preserve it. And that's why I'm where I am in Colonial Kingston, New York. I'm looking out the window over here. There's the 1777 Tappan House. To my left, there's a 1777 Senate House. On the corners, the 1750s Franz Rogan House, the 1774 Academy, the 1690 Dr. Person House, and the 1763 Dr. Jensen House.
Do you wear a tri-corner hat? Or wish you could?
But that's why I love it here, because the seeds of democracy was sown here. And that's why I do what I do.
Whatever happened to the pursuit of happiness? They sure seem to do everything they can to destroy that.
Yes, and who are the they? Who are the they?
Well, the kids were running that oil company in Ukraine.
You got and the flunkies that call themselves politicians that do the bidding for the multinationals that deregulated so much of society so that the hands of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of the few.
Gerald, can you again remind people about where they can learn about the things that you're seeing about to happen, and you let people know, and when they claim ignorance, well, I don't want them to be able to claim ignorance anymore. Where should they go and take a look at?
Trendsjournal.com, trendsjournal.com. And Jim, not only is it the magazine, every weekday we do Trends in the News, the real news that's, way ahead of time and beyond anything that you'll see on any network. So we do a news show every day, every weekday. So that's part of your subscription as well. And again, our site is trendsjournal.com. And for the people that can't afford the full price, and it's not a lot, it's only $99 a year for the online edition, we give discount requests for people. We know people are having tough times out there.
That's nice of you to do, Gerald.
Well, again, we're all in this together, and we want to, what we do, as I said, we're not selling anything. As I see it, everything will change when the individual changes. And when more people start changing and waking up and have the courage to be themselves and find the greatness within them, that's when we reach a renaissance and rediscover the greatness of who we are as a civilization rather than following the fools that are destroying us. And the motto, by the way, of the Trends Journal is, think for yourself. I don't want anybody to believe what I say. This is how I see things. This is where we see them going. You decide. Think for yourself.
After the break, Robert Campbell on This Week in Money.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
My guest is Robert Campbell, author of the book Timing the Real Estate Market. Bob, do you have a new book coming out?
No, I do not, Jim. That book took me 1 year, 1.5 years to write, and it was pure misery, and I promised myself never to do it again.
So now we're going to have to take a look at your newsletter.
Well, that's you have to take, but my book is a how-to book. It's what's called an evergreen book. That book was published 12 years ago, and it's just as valuable today as it was then because nothing has changed. I mean, I'm not, it's not something that I've readjusted the model or anything. It's been unchanged, for almost 20 years now. So that, it worked well 20 years ago, it worked well 10 years ago, and it's still working well today. And that's what the book teaches you. The key indicators to follow so that you're ahead of the curve with respect to, knowing which way the cycles are moving.
Your website?
realestatetiming.com.
Very simple. Okay, Bob. Well, the U.S. housing market, you said, is changing. Is it changing for the better or the worst?
It's cooling off, Jim. It's definitely cooling off. It's rolling over don't get me wrong, prices are still going up, but they're going up at a slower momentum than they were before. So that's what I meant is the cooling trend. And of course, prior to any major trend change in the market, things go up and then they start going down at a certain speed while they're still appreciating maybe at, where the U.S. housing market was appreciating at that 12% maybe 2-3 months ago. Pretty soon, the next 2 or 3 months, it's going to be appreciating at 10%, then 6%, then 3%. And then pretty soon it's going to go negative on a year-over-year basis, and that's the trend change. And hopefully for those people that play the cycles like I do, you want to be out of the market as a spectator before the major trend change occurs.
In Canada, we've just had one of our investment companies offer a 1.99% mortgage. Now, is that a wise thing to snap up in the kind of market we might be looking at here in North America?
It is, you guys, I don't know how much your market's corrected yet, if any at all. Has it corrected in the last year or so, Jim?
Well, Vancouver's been rather soft, which means prices haven't been going up rapidly. But in Toronto, detached homes up 13% in a year. Townhomes up 18%.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, is that sustainable or...
Well, of course it's not sustainable. Now, and especially that, here's the problem with those mortgages being what they are. And the same thing here in the United States. Those mortgages have been artificially depressed by the Fed via its quantitative easing policies. All around the world, we've brought interest rates down. I mean, look at Greece. Bonds in Greece were selling for some incredible number. I'd hate to tell you. Like 5-year bonds. You know what they're going for today? Like 5%. So gee, everything's back to normal. And see, what the central bankers around the world have done, they've depressed the prices of these interest rates so that you see like 1.99%. Or even here in the United States, it's still, 4.25% for a mortgage. But here's the problem. Here's the problem that the world's running into right now, especially the U.S. Fed, that there are a lot of people that believe that the U.S. Fed, the next move is going to be to raise interest rates, not because they want to, but because they have to, for the simple reason that the insurance companies and the pension companies are going broke. Now, instead of investing money to pay these exorbitant pensions out that they don't have enough money for anyway, instead of having a return on their money of like 6 or 7%, now it's down to 3.5%, Jim. So, and they keep making these payouts, their principal keeps declining, and pretty soon they're just going deeper and deeper in the hole. So pretty soon the next thing that's going to get bailed out is the insurance companies and the pension companies if interest rates don't get up, start rising to get the rate of return on their investments up to a sufficient level where they're only underfunded by, let's say, 25 to 30%, as opposed to 35 to 40 or 45, wherever it might go, at a lower interest rate.
Is there any danger that governments will have to dip into our bank accounts to compensate these companies for their dangerous practices?
Hey, that's the rule. That's the rumor. That's what Lagarde, that chairman of the IMF, Lagarde, wants the world to do. They want bail-ins across the board. Take a certain amount, 5%, 10% of everybody's bank account, to fund the shortages.
Well, they'd be hard pressed to find anything going into my bank account.
They'd have to start digging in the ground, wouldn't they?
For sure, like digging in the ground on my parents' farm.
Well, hey, I don't disagree with that strategy, Jim.
The last time here in Canada that a bank tried to give us very, very low mortgage rates, the finance minister phoned them and said, "What are you doing? You're crazy. I want higher rates." Well, that finance minister recently stepped down from his post and then a few days later died. He's not around anymore, and I don't think anybody's nervous in the Canadian financial community about super low interest rates right now.
They're never worried about it, Jim. I mean, like, I can't speak for Canada, but here in the United States, remember at the peak of the housing bubble in 2005, Bernanke, was speaking, said over and over again. He goes, "I'm not worried about a housing crash because housing prices in the United States have never declined on a year-over-year basis in the history of our country. So, just cool it with the disaster talk." Well, obviously, guess what happened?
Yeah, we should have been talking disaster.
Exactly. They will tell you what they want to do, what they hope things are going to do, and even though they make mistake after mistake, their forecasts are wrong time and again, that everybody still wants to believe them. Everybody still hangs on every word. And it's just that the facts speak otherwise. That's what they're going to do. You can't, that's why you just have to follow, cold hard data and make your decisions based on that. Either that or, watch what they do and not what they say. You know that expression. And that's really true.
Governments tend to do that.
That's what they do. And interestingly, with respect to governments, now we're talking about governments, that it's interesting to find out in the history of the world, these governments get bigger and bigger and bigger, to fund their they're overspending and things like that. And then pretty soon it comes down to the point that, they can't pay for the promises and they're going broke. Has it ever happened once in the history of the world that these governments come to a come to Jesus moment and reform themselves to correct their mistakes of the past? Has that ever happened?
Can't recall off the top of my head.
No, it's never happened. So in other words, we're just going to go headlong into this until there's a major disaster, economic disaster like a 1930s or some version of that, another real estate crash, another housing market crash, but to think that the governments are going to, just that see the mistakes of their ways and correct themselves. There's about one chance in a million that's going to happen. That's why I tell people that save yourself. Don't worry about saving the world.
More with Robert Campbell next on This Week in Money.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Robert Campbell, author of the book, Timing the Real Estate Market, as you said, published several years ago, but still applicable to today's market. After all, trends don't change. People don't change all that much. So what worked a few years ago most likely will work for you again. China right now, their housing starts are down 25%. Does that mean the Chinese real estate market is about to burst?
Well, that depends if you can believe the information that's coming out of China. And I'm not the best authority on China, Jim. I don't really know anybody else that has a handle because the data that comes out of there is so highly controlled. Nobody really knows. They've built all these cities, major cities, beautiful cities, high quality construction with nobody living there. Does that make any sense? So maybe they've been doing what we've been doing to keep their economy going. They've just been, pedal on the metal with government spending to keep a high growth rate of GDP, building roads to nowhere, bridges to nowhere, cities that can't be filled in order to keep their high GDP. And maybe now the guacamole is about to hit the fan.
Yes, the guacamole after it's been processed. Is there anywhere in the world right now you would feel confident if you bought real estate that its value would hold, or at least hold, or maybe go up?
I would think, and I have to speak of some parts of the United States because I don't know the world. There's some parts in the United States. If I had to invest any place, if you told me where would you put your money right now and you had to leave it for 10 years because you don't want to lose it, I would put my money in Texas. There are more people moving to Texas. Texas has a fairly well-run economy. The real estate market never bubbled like it did in, Miami, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and areas like those. And right now, it's just the economy's real strong, the unemployment rate is low, and the cost of living is fairly low. Jim? So I mean, it's certain areas like that haven't succumbed to the wild swings of the market that still have they're sitting on solid ground. I'm very impressed with Texas, for example. And for example, have you ever heard of the U-Haul indicator?
Well, I'm sure it has to do with renting those little trailers you put on the back of your car to move somewhere.
Exactly. If you want to rent a U-Haul in Los Angeles to go to Dallas, Texas, it costs you $2,600. Guess if you're in Dallas, Texas, and want to rent a U-Haul going back to L.A., you know what it costs?
$1,000?
$800.
Oh, well, that wasn't bad, ballpark.
Exactly. But what does that tell you?
That they're all there and they need to have them returned to L.A.
Exactly. So there's quite a migration going on. And that's something that I think that we could see. In fact, are you familiar with Meredith Whitney?
Enlighten us.
Okay, Meredith Whitney, she's an economist, and she wrote a book that I just read called The Fate of the States. And she says, and she's the one that thinks all the local and state governments are going to start going broke because they can't print money to fund themselves. And she says there's going to be a migration in the United States from the states that are broke, like California and Illinois, for example, and they're going to go to the states that are that are more solid. And one of those states was Texas, she identified. So that's what I find interesting. So that's what you're going to do. The cost of living is still fairly low. You know, a house in LA will cost you $200,000, where the same house in Dallas will cost you $125,000. The job market is solid. It's good. You know, the state is better run than it is in California. And she said that's where people are going to go because they won't have to start taxing you like crazy, you know, just to fund their, their indulgences.
Well, I hear Los Angeles now spends more money on Wall Street than it does to prepare or to repair its real streets.
That wouldn't surprise me one bit. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well, if everybody's running to Texas, does that mean there will be bargains elsewhere, or you just don't want to live where the bargains are?
You want to live where the bargains are. You want to go to where someplace where it's safe. And from what I can see, you're not going to move to London or New York City. I mean, those places are like super, super overvalued, you know, relative, because that's where some of the safe money's going. They think is safe, international money. So I would think you'd want to go someplace that's, something that's where it's still, the fundamentals are still strong. Low unemployment, low tax base, you know, the governments aren't living large, you know, paying paying everybody to, not to work and that kind of thing.
Like they used to pay farmers not to grow crops.
Oh, absolutely. Back in the 1930s, or dairy farmers not to produce milk. They'd let them produce the milk and then dump the stuff down the sewer pipes.
I guess in Canada, the parallel to Texas would be Alberta, where the oil patch, no matter what the price of oil seems to do, is still booming. The world says they don't want to buy oil from the oil sands, yet if your car's running out of gasoline, they don't mind where the gas comes from.
That's exactly right. I saw a chart, a very well done chart about 2 months ago, and it showed from about the year 2000 on that the major oil producers in the world, the Exxons, the Mobils, the Shells, the British Petroleum, their cost of production for oil has gone up between 12 and 15% per year for the last 10 to 15 years. Guess how much production has increased?
How much?
10 or 20%. And that's why the oil that's left is the stuff that's coming out of Canada, this oil shale, and North Dakota. That's not an oil operation. That's a mining operation, Jim.
Exactly
that's
right.
Expensive oil. Or they're going out in the oceans and drilling down, in 2 miles of water to drill down. So the point I'm making is this, is the cost of production for all the big companies is going up, 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 and that's barely to keep pace with the demand. What has to happen to price?
Well, we've been seeing it at our pumps here, $1.50 a liter. We pay, and that's almost 4 gallons, or I should say 4 liters to a gallon.
Here in the United States, we use gallons. Here in Southern California, a gallon of gas is $4.50.
Well, right here, it's probably between $6.50 and $7.
Wow. Well, you see, that's not a pure oil thing. Like, I came back from Europe and it was like $8. A lot of that's extra taxes add on.
Yes, Vancouver pays the highest gasoline prices, for taxes in Canada.
Exactly. Yep, that kind of thing. But nevertheless, the price of oil, the price of gasoline, from what I'm seeing, in the long run, has one way to go, up.
So buying a house that's maybe a little more expensive nearer to where you work might be a good idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that urbanization is going to continue. In fact, that from what I understand, that cities in general, that people are returning to the center cities because everything's there. That's where they're building the ballparks. That's where they have the entertainment. That's where they have this. That's where they're working. So the suburb idea of getting in a car that gets 20 miles to the gallon and driving, 20, 30 miles, each way to work isn't good. It's going to get more and more expensive is what it's going to get. And it's going to force people into, living closer, to where they operate.
Well, that's exactly what's happened in Vancouver. We had a very well-populated downtown core anyway with the West End. And now we have a place called Yaletown that used to be nothing but warehouses, and now it's all high-rises. And that's where the center of Vancouver's high-tech industry is. So you don't need a car. You can just ride your bike or walk.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that's what the world's coming to. And that's a lower standard of living. Have you been to Europe, Jim?
Not lately.
Oh, welcome to Europe. I was there last summer for the first time in my life to Rome, to London, and especially to Rome. And, everything is centralized. Everybody's running around on motor scooters, little tiny cars if somebody has a car. People live in the urban areas. They live above the stores and things like that. It's a much slower pace, and it's a lower standard of living. And unfortunately, I think that's where the United States is getting dragged, whether they like it or not.
Robert, always fun to talk to you. Again, maybe remind people about your website.
My website is realestatetiming.com.
Thanks to our guests, Gerald Celente and Robert Campbell, and thank you for listening. I'm Jim Goddard for Phil Mackesy. We're back next week with more This Week in Money.
This Week in Money is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.